but we have to switch this over.
Oh, the input.
You want to dim the lights a bit?
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah. What are these wrapped?
Yeah, this is good. You want to just start for it?
Sure.
All right.
Well, welcome to another Friday class. So, I think the ultimate goal of this course today is to make you more marketable as attorneys. Give you a slightly different skill set. But as I was doing research on social media, I ran across this blog post, which I thought was interesting in how it kind of goes far afield, Harvard Business Review. And he said, he thought it was important as he, worked through his career and started his own business. Like, why are we here? What is the meaning of life? Right? And I think that is a useful point. So I want all of you to send me an email, and I want 2-3 sentences, no more than a paragraph. I'll give you 2 minutes. What is the meaning of life? What do you think it is? You guys had to write a blog post? Right? Don't overthink it. Just what do you think? neil.axton@wmitchell.edu. And this is a pop quiz. All right? What do you think?
It's a lot to ask for on Friday.
Nobody said law school was easy.
How do you spell Neil?
N-E-A-L? $20 more seconds. Everybody done? I mean, whatever you got, just send it. And there's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer, although I reserve the right to mock you if I feel it's appropriate. So, here's what Mr. Schwartz said. This is his conclusion after much introspection, which I have a philosophy degree, so, I feel qualified to classify such things. I think this is just a version of utilitarianism. His view, I'm just supposed to add more value than I take. Utilitarianism is really a form of hedonism, right? If you read Bentham and John Stuart Mill, they have this some sort of hedonic calculus, right? They want to make people happy, right? You try to do things so that it maximizes happiness. You contribute more than you take. You save more people than you kill. But I think he also sort of invokes duty and honor, which, Aristotle wrote a couple of books on ethics, but I think if you distill it down, the sort of Greek worldview is that the purpose of life is to be good to your friends and hard to your enemies, which a lot of people do. Feminists talk about the care ethic. Has anybody read about the care ethic? It's really a response to Kant and some of the other people who very much talk about duty and honor, which is a sort of impersonal thing. And they say, no, the purpose of life is to take care of the people we love. That's why women spend their lives taking care of their families, raising children, working with civic groups. We're supposed to take care of one another. But how do you define your group? For some people, it's all about the family. For white supremacists, it's about, the white race. My wife does tribal law. I think tribes are, still alive and well in street gangs. People form these affiliations, these interest groups that they want to protect. Now, for most of us, it's the nation state, right? The United States of America. We all pledge allegiance to it. I've had several jobs where I've had to swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States, as well as the Constitution of the state of Kansas. That is our affiliation. But we break it down into smaller groups. And nations typically, the United States is a little unusual. Typically, a nation was an ethnic group. I think that tribal identity still runs through a lot of what we do. I think it's very curious that in Iraq, we want to make them a modern democracy and sort of smash their tribal institutions. That went swimmingly. I think it's hard to talk about what we want. We talk about free will. Now, some philosophers will tell you that free will is an illusion, that we are programmed either by our genetics or by the social milieu in which we are born, but we really don't have a lot of free will. We just have the illusion of free will. But that's a whole other class. But these people are generally determinists, right? What we want to do is determined by the group that we are born into. Now, if you are, I assume there's a fair number of Christians in the room, but if you were a Hindu or if you believe in reincarnation, then the purpose of life is actually just to be reborn in a higher form, to sort of complete the karmic wheel. I was watching a martial arts movie the other day, and it was a sequel, and the character was actually reborn from movie to movie. I think that really kind of changes your view of what life's about. But nihilism. Anybody know what nihilism is? Nihilism is very simple. Nihilists say there is no point to life. Just have a good time, right? There is no meaning. And people often confuse it with existentialism, and I often see nihilism / existentialism. And I think existentialism is probably one of the most misunderstood things next to postmodernism. But existentialists, I think, are really responding to nihilists. The existentialists say that there's not one-size-fits-all meaning to life. That you have to find your own value. That you have to find your own way, what it is that you think life is about. There is value, but it's different for different people. And you have to come to that. No one can just tell you this is the meaning of life. It is to be reincarnated, or it is to fulfill some sort of Christian ethic, or it is to, take care of your family. Maybe that's it for you, but you have to decide. There's not just one answer. So I bring this up because I think that existentialism makes a lot of sense to me. I assume you guys are here in law school because you think there is a meaning to life, or at the very least you want to, do well in your careers. And there are lots of different career paths that you can take out of law school. And I think to me, it's kind of like existentialism. What do you want to do with your life, with your time on Earth? What do you want to get out of it? What do you want to do as a career? What do you think is going to be meaningful to your society and is going to keep you from getting bored? Because if you go back and you read Mr. Schwartz's article, he hated his job. Absolutely couldn't stand it. He had to, just start his own company because he was not being fulfilled by what he was doing. And we're going to be talking about social media. And I think that social media also forces you to reflect on what are you interested in? What do you want to be in 10 years? What do you want to be at the end of your career? What's worth blogging about? Right? What excites you? And I don't want to lose track when we talk so much about social media that social media is just one way to make connections, but I think it's better seen as a way to reinforce connections. I mean, I do have some friends who I met them in real life after knowing them online for several years, but that's kind of unusual. Usually it's people that you have met in real life, and then you build a different sort of bond through Facebook or through LinkedIn or some of these other networking sites. But it's really important to attend professional events, to go to conferences, to go to the local bar meetings, special interest groups, and then see the social media as an adjunct of that, right? You're trying to reinforce some of those views. And I actually think that I get to know people in some ways better through their social networking than I do than just meeting them. I mean, there's not that much you can really get from somebody over cocktail chatter. But when you can go back and you can see their last 200 Facebook posts, you get some sense of what it is they're interested in, what they do. One of the things that all of you, I think, are in a position where you are going to be looking for mentors, people you want to work for, people you want advice from. And I found a little article, and he suggested that when you're doing those, one of the best things to do is to send a handwritten note, right? How many handwritten notes did you guys get last year? I got a couple of thank you notes, right? How many emails did you get last year? Right? Social media may not be the best way to get somebody's attention. Putting a comment on their blog, sending them an email. I mean, there's, you can get someone with that, but a handwritten note may be the best way to get their attention. They also suggest, maybe go find out who their assistant is on LinkedIn, ask them out to lunch. That's another way. We'll talk about competitive intelligence in a little bit, but social media allows you to find out information. It's another way of doing research, which is, of course, why I think it's fascinating. This person also suggests that you comment on their blog. If you make intelligent comments, after a while, they're going to start to notice you. And then when they get the handwritten note or the email from you, it's not going to seem so out of the blue. They will have some context, some sense of who you are. Now, this is my own suggestion, joining a LinkedIn group. If somebody maintains a group on LinkedIn, they tend to be very interested in that. And that's another way that I think you can really make a connection. I think, there's a lot of discussion in social media about whether or not social media is passé. It's like the, newspapers talking about whether or not newspapers are dead. And some people think the blog moment has passed, but there are other ways that I think are sort of eclipsing that. And the reason I think it's so important to reflect on who you are, what you want out of life, what you think is meaningful, is because when you're an attorney, you are the product. You are marketing yourself. And it's important, I think, to be authentic. You don't want to try to become something you're not. Because A, people see through it, and B, I think you will end up hating it. If you have to be untrue to yourself, if you're representing people that you despise, that's not a good way to be happy. That's a way to have a heart attack at 50. So I think, we're just talking about setting up blogs in here, but I think that you want to look at a little more largely, because what you're really doing is you're making your personal brand. You're saying, this is who I am, this is what I'm interested in. And so the more authentic you can be in your blogging and in your social networking sites, as well as in your practice, I think you're going to be happier and you're going to be more authentic. People are going to believe you rather than this is just something that they're putting on, this is cocktail chatter sort of stuff. When I read personal branding stuff, it's generally written by business people, marketers, who they strike me as a little phony. It's for them very much something to do, something to manage their personal brand. And so when they say be authentic, I'm like, well, how authentic are you? I think there's a happy medium. I think you can overmanage your brand. I think you can let it go totally out of control. And certainly if you're posting up pictures of yourself getting drunk on Facebook, your brand's probably a little bit out of control.
Maybe authentic then.
Yeah. I think that the happy, you want to portray yourself as maybe a little more optimistic than you are, a little more hardworking, not extreme, you don't want to be ridiculous, but you want to put yourself in a positive light. All right. You don't want to necessarily let it all hang out on a social media site. Wait until they get to know you before you do that. Right. So I think a happy medium is what you're after. You want to be true to yourself. You want to have a place where you can do that. We'll talk about some strategies for that. But I think you also want to use social media to show your expertise. And at this stage of your career, maybe you're still developing your expertise. But spend your energies on things that actually interest you, not just because somebody told you that would be a good thing to do, or your parents expect you to do it. And so I think that this is going to lead to speaking engagements. I mean, people will start to know you as an expert. They will ask you to come and guest blog. I mean, there are lots of different opportunities. But I think, again, who are you? What are you interested in? What do you want your expertise to be? Right? And that's where you want to put your energies. Anybody here speak German? Okay. Lebenskünstler, life artist is how I've seen that translated. These are people who always have 3 or 4 jobs. They're doing consulting on the side. I have a relative who he's a soil scientist, and he's he has honeybees and he sells the honey, and he has trees and he makes syrup, and he is just, I mean, every time I talk to him, he has found another way to make money. Doing something. I mean, he is just, to me, he is the life artist, right? I mean, he is just constantly sees some place where there's a niche that's unfilled. And I think that especially in an overflowing job market where there are so many JDs floating around, it's good to sort of think about, where is this an underserved niche? Is this something where I could really make a mark, that maybe it's an emerging area, something that people aren't doing, or maybe this is a clientele that's not really being served? My experience in practice was that there's a huge demand for legal work. The trick is making as much money as you want off of it. But if you can find people who aren't being represented, then you have to figure out how you're going to make it profitable. But if you're doing something that you enjoy, it makes it a lot easier. It's much easier to take the long view. I'm going to build my reputation. I'm going to build my practice up. But if you hate it, it's just not going to work out very well at all. Now, when I think of social media sites, I mean, I think Monster is a form of social media, but it's strictly about employment. And Facebook is strictly social, and LinkedIn, I think, is somewhere in between. And when you're trying to figure out where you're going to spend your time, I think this continuum is very important. Because, I mean, it's very likely you're going to end up in all 3 types of environments, right? You're going to be doing social things, you're going to be doing things that are strictly employment related, but then you also want, I think LinkedIn has really emerged as a place where you can network, you can meet people, you can develop expertise. They've got so many different groups on different topics. But it's not just about business, it's about learning. It started as just a place to put your resume, right? That was, for years, all that LinkedIn was. But now they've really come much more to, I think, being a full-fledged social networking service. So a quick poll, how many are on Facebook? Okay, how many are on LinkedIn? Seriously. Guys, I mean, it should be the other way around. Everybody here should be on LinkedIn, right? I mean, all of you are going to be looking for a job soon. I mean, Facebook is great, but Facebook's more likely to lose you a job than to get you a job. So really, I think, so my suggestion would be, if you aren't on LinkedIn, I'd sign up right after class. Right? I mean, we'll look at LinkedIn a little bit later. When I think of the business uses for social media, I mean, rainmaking is probably number 1. And it's actually the trickiest one to do. But I know people who have gotten jobs off of LinkedIn. I know people who have gotten legal work off of Facebook. They're friends from high school. See, they're a lawyer. They, send them a base mail, as I call it, asking for legal advice, and that actually turns into a paying client. But if you're putting up pictures of yourself doing shots on Facebook every day, that's not how it's going to work out. So you need to manage that brand, even though it's a primarily social network. Background checks, probably all of you at some point are going to hire somebody. It's almost malpractice not to check their Facebook, not to see what their public information is, not to Google them. And LinkedIn, I have been told by HR professionals that one of the dangers of LinkedIn from their perspective is that people will do an underground reference check. They get your resume, they think it looks interesting, and so then they'll hop on and they'll check, to see what your past other experiences on LinkedIn, things that maybe didn't make it on the one-page resume. HR professionals think that is bad because ideally what you want them to do is to call you, right? But personally, I think that that's not such a bad thing. If I have I mean, generally I have other relevant work experience that doesn't show up on a one-page resume, so I think it actually improves my brand. And also, I think that the HR professionals are ignoring that you might get consulting work, that you might get other people who are checking you out off of LinkedIn. I've talked to attorneys who, if they're working on a deal, they start sending their email around and their signature file, has their firm on it. They find that as those emails work through the legal community, they get a lot more hits on their blog, on their personal website, that more people are checking out their LinkedIn profile because people want to know who you are. And if you're just a name on an email, that's easily forgotten. But if they can put a face with it, if they can put some job experience, if they see on LinkedIn that you both used to work for the same law firm, all of a sudden you're a real person. And when you meet them at a party or at an event for a CLE or something, they're going to put that together. They're going to remember, oh, you're the person I dealt with on that deal. And if they had a good experience of you from that, you have a bit more reputation. So I think that the background checks, it cuts both ways, but I think it's worth it. Competitive intelligence is something that librarians talk about, and that's getting as much information as you can about your competitors primarily. Competitive intelligence, you don't want to break the law. We're not quite into corporate espionage, but competitive intelligence is like everything but, as far as you can go in researching people without breaking the law. And this is something that I think is, you're going to see more and more. I know in the law firm setting, when I talk to law firm librarians, a lot of what they do is doing business research, is finding out about the firms, about business practices of the people that they are involved in litigation with. So I think these two pretty much speak for themselves. Managing your image and brand, again, I think that's really important. I think you should be very conscious about what you post, who your audience is, and what it's going to do for you. Current awareness, of course, I actually see LinkedIn as an information discovery device. The same way as Twitter. I don't go to Twitter to communicate with people. I go to Twitter to see what other people are talking about. What is the new topic? What is going on? Rather than, I have my own RSS feeds and Google News and such, but I'm very curious to know what other professionals, people that I am interested in, what are they Twittering about? What do they think is important? So it's a way for me to gain information, not just to share it.
So I'm just still thinking about your comment about information that might be in a person's email signature line and how that sort of floats through and it may get forwarded to different people. And I think that there's something true about what you said, which is if I get those messages, then frequently I'll be on Google then trying to look up to see a little bit more about who that person is. Maybe the best representation of who I am or who certain people are, maybe their Facebook profile, but what we tell everybody to lock that down so that it can't be seen. So what should they put in a signature line? Because there ought to be, it seems like there ought to be something there. Mm-hmm. And in Twitter, if you tweet, there's a space for a website. A redirect to a website. Where should that go? Should it be like a public LinkedIn profile? Should it be your own personal website? Should it be something else? It ought to be something, right?
Yeah, and again, I think, like existentialism, there's not maybe one right answer. A lot of faculty at Mitchell have their SSRN page in their SIG file because, publications are the coin of the realm. Go and read what I've written. This is my professional work. I made a wiki of Safety Neil, everything you ever wanted to know but were afraid to ask. And that's where I linked to my blog, my LinkedIn page, my contact information, sort of as a hub for all of the different, I have so much web presence, just keeping track of it becomes a chore. And actually, I forget about the wiki of Safety Neil once in a while. Have to go back and update it. I think that if you hang out your own shingle, if you are a law practice, you should have a web page. There should be a web page with maybe, a couple of client testimonials, maybe a blog, attached to that. I don't know that I would send people straight to the blog, but I think you want some page that represents you and links people out to the positive things that you want. Yeah, and really, LinkedIn is not a bad place to start. You know, especially if you're open to receiving contacts through LinkedIn. For those of you who aren't on it, you can like totally lock down your LinkedIn profile. They can see like your current job, but they can't email you. They can't get a hold of you. Other people, it's very easy. Anybody can sort of email you off of LinkedIn. You know, and if you're trying to get consulting gigs, you want to be much more open. You know, and people can also like friend of a friend you. You know, if there's it very much does the first degree, second degree, third degree of connection, and you can get introduced by someone. So even someone you've never met, but if you have a mutual acquaintance, you can send them an email asking them to forward your email to this other person to make an introduction that way. It's kind of an odd matchmaking feature, but LinkedIn does that. You can also pay to be able to email people directly, you know, because of course LinkedIn is all about the business, right? It's all about money. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Does everybody agree with that? Anybody have another thought? So I was talking about current awareness. Now, I have a different idea about information overload for most people. Information overload is pejorative, right? It's a bad thing. But I actually welcome it, right? Because it's only by seeing a ton of information that you can start to see patterns emerging. You know, if there's this underserved niche or a new area of law that's developing, I mean, if you stay within your bubble, you're never going to see that coming, right? I think you have to take in a lot of information. I think you have to sort of swim the seas of information, you know, taking what's relevant to you and ejecting what's not. And apophenia is making connections where none were seen before. I mean, this is really what faculty do. You know, they take and they make a connection between two areas of practice. They write a law review article about it. All of a sudden, they're the expert on that topic, right? And again, I think that comes from taking in a lot of information. You have to see these disparate things. And then, I mean, our brains are very good at making patterns, but if you don't have the raw data, you're not going to find it. And we live in an unprecedented age where we are overwhelmed with information, where there's so much of it available. And I think you have to embrace that. That's a great thing. You know, don't hide from it, as I see, you know, a lot of people, you know, who are on the faculty maybe, I mean, they're afraid of it. They hide behind that information. I also wanted to talk a little bit about information-seeking behavior, which is librarian geek speak. But people constantly search for information. I mean, we constantly want to know more. And this is actually where gossip comes from, right? If people don't know, they will make it up. And that's why you always want to try to get in front of the story, right? You want to put out positive information because otherwise people will make it up. And then nobody believes you when you put out the real story later, right? I mean, that's just because people are always looking for information. And, you know, especially now, I see it with cell phones all the time. I mean, somebody's waiting in line at the post office. They get out their phone because they need some stimulation. You know, that is just human. I mean, we humans, we just crave information. So we're always looking for information. And then we have to evaluate that information, which, you know, we librarians are always talking about. Now, sometimes I want authoritative information, but most of the time, I just want something interesting, right? That's why I'm reading gossip, because I want to be stimulated. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I'll figure that out later by taking in a bunch of other information and comparing it. But people want information. We need it. And so when you're putting out a strategy, think about how do people look for information? Where do they go? What do they consider authoritative? Who is your audience? You know, are you getting to them? You know, if you have a clientele, you know, maybe you're doing a lot of DUI defense. DUI defense paid my rent every month when I was in practice, right? Drunks, that is my target audience, right? How do I communicate with drunks, right? That's the question you need to be asking yourself if you want to do more DUI defense. So these are just some of the things we do. Another thing to consider is when people make decisions, we often have analytical reasons, but oftentimes it's an emotional reaction. You know, you do all the car research, Volvo, BMW. Volvo's probably the better bet, but you get the BMW anyway, because it's really about sexy, right? So much of life comes down to sexy. And I think that, you know, if you're attractive, put a picture of yourself on your website. If you're not attractive, buy a model and put their picture on your website, right? People make decisions for all sorts of irrational reasons. And it just is what it is, you know? Don't fight it. And then people also want to validate their decisions. if they don't get that information, but I think it's very important. I saw that in practice with like somebody takes a plea bargain, right? They have to go to jail for 2 days as part of that plea bargain. A couple days later, they're going to call you up and they're going to be really upset and distraught. And you have to remind them that it really was a good deal and go through it all over again. I got very tired of that sort of hand-holding, but it's just part of the decision-making process and information-seeking behavior. Now, social media, there are so many different things out there. I don't even know what half of these things are. I mean, really, half of them I've used, the other half, and the great thing, the bad thing, half of these will be gone in 5 years, right? I mean, this stuff just springs up. I know a lot of attorneys don't want to spend the time to play with it. I mean, I'm very lucky as a librarian in that I get to play with it. That's kind of my job. But I think it's fun. I think it's great. But when you're in practice and you don't have a lot of time, I think it's important to have a plan, to optimize your time of what you're going to do. So one of the things you want to do is manage your Google presence, right? So everybody here Googled themselves, right? I mean, it's important to know if something's there. And I frequently get the question, what do you do if there's something bad? You guys already discussed this in class, right? The best advice I've heard is just to bury it. Put up lots of good things. Start a couple of blogs. Do a Tumblr account. Put up so many things that show you in a positive light that all of a sudden this bad thing is on page 38. You can buy some, there are some services you can hire that will actually help you, sort of search engine optimization to loot those things down. But Google never forgets. You're really never going to be able to get away with it. So again, don't post up pictures of yourself doing shots at Billy's. If you don't put it up there, you don't have to worry about it as much.
Well, you were asking how do I communicate with drums. That's how you communicate with drums.
Well, there's nothing wrong with going to the bar and doing shots. It's the putting the pictures on Facebook. That's where I think...
Just leave business cards all over Billy's, and you should be fine. Or there must be an app, for people who are, I don't know, should I drive app, and then your banner could pop up.
Well, there was a criminal defense attorney in LA who he had postcards, like the top 10 things not to say to the cop. And yeah, I think he would mass mail these postcards, but he'd leave them in bars, So yeah, who is your target audience? How do you communicate with them? And it may not be social media. It may be that a business card, a postcard is going to be better. But social media is free. It's cheap and it's easy, so you may as well. Pseudonyms, everybody knows what a pseudonym is. That's a fake name, right? But then bibliographic identity, it may be that you want to practice in several different areas of law, and you may want to, have a different tone for each of them. I mean, if you want to do appellate work, your clients may be attorneys. It may be attorneys that you are trying to address. So the blog posts that are going to be interesting to attorneys are very different than blog posts that will be interesting to drunks, right? And so you may have sort of different personas. And these are actually Mitchell grads. I'm more interested in their privacy than they are. But, don't start a group with this title. I mean, just say no. Yeah, I mean, Google never forgets. So, I think a little bit of forethought in the front end will be good for you. This came out just this week. This individual is British, and he put this on Twitter, and he was detained by the Department of Homeland Security and sent back to the UK.
No, seriously.
Seriously. Yeah, and, I mean, it doesn't put, really, the Department of Homeland Security, get a grip. But that's the world we live in, yeah, just a little bit of forethought. Yeah, never text bin Laden and bomb, in the same tweet. So I think that really LinkedIn, again, I think this is a great place to spend your time and energy. If you don't have enough clients, spend some time trying to get them. If you get really busy, you can, back off a little bit on the social networking. Trust is a really interesting thing to try to do on an online environment, and I think LinkedIn is really trying to do that. You know, you're only supposed to join, make connections with people that you actually know in real life or that you've had some sort of business dealing with. You know, they have the recommendation system so that you get some idea that there are other people out there who actually would recommend this person. It's kind of hard to get into trouble on LinkedIn. I mean, I have seen a couple of inappropriate things, but not very many. I mean, usually it's a pretty safe place to go to spend your time. It's not real exciting, but you know, if you're trying to go to business, if you're trying to build your professional reputation, this is a much better place to spend your time than Facebook. Facebook is fun, but it's really dangerous. You know, and I mean, now there's a discussion about the. Go ahead.
Okay, but so this goes to your point earlier about who are you trying to reach? Are you trying to reach other attorneys, or are you trying to reach drunks? And LinkedIn, you're not reaching the drunks, presumably, unless they're drunk attorneys. But on Facebook, it's kind of the intersection of that, theoretically. You could be reaching both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so I guess it really depends. Is your strategy to try to improve your brand to achieve referrals from other attorneys, or just, you know, demonstrate your expertise so you get invited to speak at a CLE or something like that? Or are you looking for a job? Or are you trying to generate clients? And what's the most, you know, so what's your top, most important idea for what you're trying to achieve, and then how are you going to do it most efficiently, I guess?
I think those are excellent points. Yeah, you're going to get a much bigger cross-section of the population on Facebook. But, you know, people's accounts are so locked down these days, I don't know actually how much transmittal there is. Janelle, you have a
I
point?
think you're right, though, that LinkedIn is where lawyers right now have the biggest presence of all the social media outlets, and they're not directly intersecting with clients, they're intersecting with other lawyers who may recommend them to the people that they know. So I think you're right that that Neil is right that all of you should sign up for a LinkedIn account this afternoon, because right now that's what lawyers are.
Well, and maybe I've overstated the advertising to drunks angle. I mean, a lot of times as an attorney, you're looking for, you know, account managers because you want to do their debt collection. You're looking for apartment developers because you want to do their financing documents. If you're trying to connect with other professionals, I mean, which, you know, if the purpose of life is to get drunk and represent your fellow drunks, I mean, you know, more power to you. But, you know, so really it is a question of, and sometimes there's where your practice is, and then there's where you want it to be. And that isn't necessarily, you know, one and the same. I mean, I defended DUIs because there was a lot of it and it was fairly easy. You know, but that isn't necessarily where I wanted to be at the end of my career. But it's also a good way to get courtroom time. Anybody know Max Schrems? He's an Austrian. He's filed 22 complaints against Facebook for violating European privacy laws. I haven't heard much discussion about him. I've been following him for at least a month. He's got his whole, an entire website, but I don't hear much discussion of this in the IPO discussions about Facebook. So I'm really curious how that's going to play out, because there's a statement in here that this all got started when Max was at Santa Clara University, and Facebook's general counsel came in and revealed to Max that the general counsel knew nothing about European privacy laws. And the Europeans have much stricter privacy laws. Each individual country has privacy laws, and then there is the EU level privacy. It's really interesting. You know, he got his digital dossier and sort of went from there. Google Plus. Is anybody on Google Plus? Is everybody on Google Plus? Okay, 3 of you. I really like Google Plus. I thought it was very interesting when Google Plus launched. Some of my friends on Facebook were like, why would I move over to Google Plus? I don't want to learn a new interface. And then these same people, like not 24 hours later, were complaining about how Facebook had changed their interface again. But it is what it is. So I thought I would just give you guys a real quick overview of Google Plus. They do circles as one of their big things. They also have, these are like my created entries, things that I'm interested in. And when I click one of these, Google does a search of Google Plus for canoeing in Minnesota. So this is like just dynamically populated based upon your interests, which is something that Facebook doesn't really do. So you've got, and this is the stream, which it's sort of the home button up here. And as you scroll down, it's very much like Facebook before the timeline. So you just got a variety of information. This morning I had, a couple of different posts about human parasitology, which, that's just kind of where my friends and interests lie, I guess. And these are public posts. Now with this, you can make things private. You can send them to different circles. You can send them to one person. But I think what's really nice is the way they allow you to target your audience. Now they also have, going along the toolbar on top, they have images. These are the images of my friends, things that they have posted on Google+. Then they have all of my posts, right, by clicking up on that top button. So I can see the things that I have posted. I can see who I've shared them with. Now they have a little smaller toolbar down here. And this is about information. I don't remember putting this information in, but Google is such a large enterprise. But I wonder if they pulled this from LinkedIn or something. I mean, this is where it starts to get a little creepy. And I think there are good reasons to be concerned about Google's new privacy policy. But you can edit your information if you want to quite easily. The other thing that I think is interesting is the +1s. This is the like on Google+. You can +1 things. And then it shows all of my +1s. Now what's interesting is they have a view profile as, so you can put in your boss's name and see what they're seeing of your profile. This is something that Facebook used to do with the privacy settings, but that was like 4 iterations ago. I mean, Facebook is just constantly changing. And I don't know how long this will stick around in Google+, but the constant incremental upgrades are in some ways the bane of my existence, but they're also job security, right? And here we have the circles. This is the 4th tab on the toolbar. And so what you do is you take these people and you drag them into the circles that you want. It's a very intuitive way of managing it. And then, if I just want to send something to my family, right, I put a post up and I just send it to that circle. Now, if something's public, by default, everyone can see it. But this really allows you to intuitively fine-tune who you're sending messages to. So maybe you have a bunch of Christian friends, some Hindu friends, some Muslim friends, right? You could very easily do this so you're not sending Muslim baiting things to your Muslim friends. It's a joke. So I really think that this is, to me, this is really powerful, and it's something that Facebook has never implemented well, and certainly not in any intuitive way. And of course we have games, right? That's what social networks are for. They're ways to waste time. I think there's a lot to like about Google+. I think the circles are great. They allow you to overlap, right? Because people fit in multiple categories. Maybe they're your boss, but they're also, your fly fishing buddy, so you can have different interest groups and people can be in multiple circles. Now, Google doesn't have a lot of people right now. I mean, Facebook is much more popular, but everyone with a Gmail account already has like a Google+ account, so I think we're going to see a tipping point where it's going to become very large. Now they have Hangouts, which if you haven't heard, it's kind of like Skype. You can just sort of create a room with anybody, and it's just built right into the technology. They're bringing all of these things together. And of course you get all of the Google compatibility. I mean, maybe Games are pro, I don't know, I'm not really into web games. It's less professional than LinkedIn, but like I say, I really like the ability to control it fine-tuned. I can have my professional work relationship, and then I can have my personal stuff. And I can, with the circles, I think, very easily control that, or at least it's a lot more transparent to me than it is with Facebook. Actually, Google's new privacy policy, the EU has asked them to wait on rolling that out. So I think Google may be getting into EU privacy problems as well. But another reason, and one of the primary reasons why I like Google+, is because these are things that I use pretty much every day. I mean, I am constantly, there are lots of other, Google Labs, all sorts of things that I don't use. I don't use Google Bookmarks. Now, Google Scholar I use, at least on a weekly basis, but you don't have to sign in for that. I don't think you really, but they could very easily hook this up with Google Docs and, all of a sudden, integrate that functionality even closer.
If you are signed in when you do into Google, when you do Google searches and Google Scholar searches, then it will save. So if you, like a week later, you forget what you found when you were searching on it, it creates a research trail. Which is also kind of creepy. But I found it useful.
Yeah, so the fact that one password gets you everything, to me, Google Plus is just, social networking right there. Yeah, and I probably will largely ditch Facebook once, there's a large shift over to Google Plus.
Hold on one sec. You're going fast, and I'm still thinking about Hangouts for a second. So my first thought was about okay, we talked a little bit about using Twitter for back channel communication in classes, or maybe we didn't, and I meant to talk about it, but good idea of keeping engaged is if you're kind of helping each other, talking to each other while class is going on, especially in a big room where it's a purely kind of Socratic dialogue with one student. That can help. And then I thought, well, a Hangout's profoundly more powerful than that, because it could be, and I'm curious from you guys whether you're doing this already. I mean, do you have a system in place with the people who you're outlining with where you're kind of in touch in a Hangout during class and you're collaborating on an outline, for example? And then, one of the nice benefits of that is that it could be, if there are 3 or 4 people doing that, then you get different opinions and you get, corrections made. But also it means that if you're wanting to focus on the teacher without feeling like you need to transcribe what's being said, you can actually do that because you know that there are other people taking notes. And then that made me think about
Hangout, but I think that's a Google Docs.
Well, yeah, but I mean, right. Well, that's true. That's Google Docs, so you can see.
Because I think Hangout is like a
I
webcam,
think
isn't
that's
it?
a webcam. So you couldn't do that in class. You could have it instead of
Okay,
class.
right. So of course you're not going to. I think you can do that instead of class. Okay, right. So Hangout is there a piece of Hangout that's not related to webcams? I mean, is it like IM also? Is it documents also,
No,
or is
that
it
would
it's
be
just straight up
Google
Skype?
G-Chat.
Google Talk.
Yeah, Google Talk.
Okay, sorry, I'm mixing my Google products here. Okay, so it's just a Google. There's got to be something more than
Well, in
Docs
Google-
that I'm thinking of.
Well, but in Docs, you can have multiple people typing in the same document at the same time.
Yeah,
So it could
and
be
you
like a
get,
group
like, different-
chat.
And it's different colors for different people, and then you can IM in the sidebar and stuff like that. But I guess so. Then I was thinking about, well, what does this mean for the practice of law? If you've got a Hangout, it could be that you're working with co-counsel somewhere, or it could be that you're if you're interested in virtual practice, which we're going to talk about later, it could be that you never meet a client face to face at any point, but you could meet them in a really kind of very useful way with a webcam on both ends, so you're actually seeing each other, and it could be that you're presenting some information to that. This is where I think Hangouts could be incorporated with some of the Google Docs functionality, where you could do a Google presentation off the web, or you can show a document that you created for that person, or whatever it is. I mean, it seems like there's some powerful tools there. What do you think? Anybody? Kind of, maybe?
I just, for CIPLA, our organization here, we're actually considering using Hangouts to do our meetings because we have a really rough time getting meeting times where everybody can meet. And so it's easier for them to, remote in from work or wherever. And I know I work at 3M and we do most of our meetings, obviously not like a Hangouts thing, but our meetings are published to the legal affairs all over the world, so we can be present at the meetings wherever they are. And so I think using, developing this tool, whereas most of us aren't going to have ability to, pay for services like global web classing and stuff like that. If you have a small practice, using Hangouts might be a good way to, publish things like that, or even, I don't know if you have a speaking engagement, it might be
Well, I also I used to have my law office in an old building that did not have an elevator. And so if I had clients who were mobility impaired, I would go meet them someplace else, either at their home or at a coffee shop or something. If you have a practice like special education, where the children often have developmental disabilities or something, the parents are caretakers, it may be a lot easier to get a hold of your clients, via a webcam than to try to, have them set up babysitting or, if they have mobility impairments, to try to get them to come to your office.
And this can be fully integrated. So hold on. So I have so I bought this domain called simoncan.net, and I bought it from GoDaddy, and then I hosted with a company called DreamHost. But and then I went and installed WordPress on it. And that's, the full version of WordPress without any of the limitations. And then, within DreamHost, I added Google Apps, which is 100% free. And what that means is that I set up my email address, which is simon@simoncan.net, or if you think of it, simon@mylawfirm.com. And then what happens is when I go to log in, it's like google.com, rather gmail.com or whatever, and I type in simon@simoncan.net and my password. And then all of this functionality is associated with this site and this domain. And it works just like you're used to with the whole Google infrastructure that you've kind of come to know and love, including Google+, so that you can imagine a situation where you don't have to change anything. There's no new system to learn. You learn Google+, all you have to do is attach it to your $10 a year domain, install WordPress like we've done this costs $5 a month from DreamHost, get Google Apps, and you're in business with all that means. That there's your Google+, connect with your clients that way, through Hangouts if you want to chat with them.
So does Google give you any promotional considerations for your advocacy?
I'm sorry. I like Google a lot. I do. But that's pretty impressive, right? Yeah?
What are the, do you know if there are like safety concerns with some of the documents? Like, I was just thinking it might be nice if you're drafting a will for somebody or drafting a contract with somebody to just be able to put it in a Google Doc and continuously share it with them.
Absolutely.
But what kind of safety concerns are there with the data and that sort of thing too? Right?
Well, I would say, first of all, if you're going to post something on a different website, you need to get your client's consent. I think when I was in practice, 10 years ago, one of the big issues was email. A lot of attorneys of an older generation would not email their clients, but the clients wanted it. They're like, just send me a damn email. I'm tired of waiting 2 days to get a letter from you. And so I think that the practice law just went right over that one, because clients demanded it. And I think as long as your clients are aware of that, that's fine. I think ideally, if you're going to be hosting on some public site, you can have, something hosted in the cloud, but you can actually have it encrypted, right? So that even though, Amazon.com or Gmail or whatever, can see that you've got files there, if you have it separately encrypted so that only you can read it and their system administrators cannot, that gives you sort of a second level of security. And this comes up a lot with the credit card, people's credit card information being compromised. And the criticism is always, well, the company should have encrypted, your credit card information with a second password, a second level of encryption. That's not perfect because, my suspicion is that if Anonymous really wants to get at this information, they may get through it. But at least you can say, I had a couple of different layers of security, rather than just putting it out there on a website. Now, if you go with Google Docs, that's free. if you want something encrypted at a second level, that's going to cost you a bit more. You're going to have to, contract for that. But that's, I think, another way of saying, I have this hosted on the cloud, but it's protected. I have, an extra layer of security. And again, I think the clients, they want that. They want that ease of use, and as long as they sign off on it. And you may consider about not putting, it's one thing if it's just like a form will, but like divorce stuff is probably a little more sensitive. The list of your, the opposing party's mistresses, you don't want to put that up there necessarily.
The ABA, this is the kind of thing that I mentioned at the end of the Twitter thing last week. The ABA has a commission, the ABA 2020 Commission on Ethics or something like that. So you would want to check with your local bar. I know the Minnesota bar has stuff to say on encryption and the cloud and things like that. So bar associations are starting to think about this. And I think you're right to be wary, especially with Google Docs. I mean, your attorney-client privilege is gone pretty much if you put it up there. So, of course, if you get your client's permission to do it.
Okay, so that's interesting. I think that it's a licensing / contractual issue. I think Google will tell you exactly what they can and will do with the information you put up there. When William Mitchell, we were considering moving, for a couple of years ago, all email was hosted locally on Exchange servers in this building. And then for various reasons, we decided we were going to consider moving to the cloud, and we considered very seriously moving to Google Apps for education. Ultimately, we didn't go that route, but a lot of people have concerns about privacy, and a lot of people don't trust Google. And so we looked very closely at the license, and they spell out exactly what they can and cannot and will not do. And I personally was satisfied that there was nothing that they were going to do with that data and were prohibited from doing under the terms of the license. Ultimately, you have to believe that and accept it. I mean, if you do, then you can move forward. And if ultimately you say, no, it's a big multinational corporation, they can do whatever they want and they won't honor the license, then you shouldn't move forward. I think, but then you can balance that against issues of hacking and sort of security of information. One of the revelations that I had in this process was we kind of assume that local is better in terms of privacy, and it may be, but then our VP for information technology said, well, look, I mean, if a really sophisticated hacker really truly wanted the data that was on our servers, he or she or they would have a much easier time of getting it than they would if they tried to hack into Google. Because Google has got serious, heavy-duty security experts, and lots of them working on encryption and preventing people from getting access to that stuff. Now, there's no reason why anybody should want to care necessarily about William Mitchell as opposed to any of the other hundreds of thousands of organizations across the world. And then there's also locally this issue of redundancy or security of information in terms of what happens if lightning strikes and your building burns down. That would mean that your computer and your hard drive and your backup drive, if it's in the building, are all gone. And so you have to be real careful about that. And if you're thinking about using a system like Amazon or Google or one of the others for backup, then it has some benefits, and it also means that your information is protected in that regard as well.
So, should we take a break? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break.
I was thinking, so
Yes.
yeah, with our clients, because as a business units using clouds everywhere for everything. It's really actually property or company.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, could we just kind of scratch the surface and should just kind of introduce the concept to us so we can do whatever we license agreements and stuff. We should start looking at some of those legal issues that come up with,
Information law, cyber law.
yeah, and so I don't know if you want me to, and I can pitch it with Kevin, but I'm not gonna know what to do with it. I feel like I got it, so I have a better idea of how to organize it.
And what do you imagine that the class would be? Would it be sort of like a 2-credit class or a 1-credit class? Or
Because I think people have different levels of what they know about what's available out there. So, I barely scratch the surface myself with understanding the cloud and what services are available.
It's a really good idea, and
I mean,
Chris
it might
Coons
be
would be really interested in that too. And I know that, because she's an expert on the click-through licensing. And has she ever taught like an information law, cyber law class before?
Well, the
talks
video game law class, I
and that
mean,
overlaps some, right?
oh, a huge amount. I mean, and she did it sort of doctrinally. So we did a day on contracts, day on torts, day on property. And for contracts, we definitely talked a lot about click-through licensing and, the EULAs with the various sites.
But what about kind of issues relating to, okay, so licensing, absolutely. But, what about, security of personal information on
Well,
the
even,
internet?
like for the intellectual property side of it.
Protection
I
of intellectual
know,
property.
some of it was, we just, for one, need to know what we should be looking for in the license agreements. Even simple stuff like, where's the data going to be stored? Because like the EU has laws where data can't be stored outside of, there are like intellectual properties that can't be stored outside of Europe.
That's really interesting.
And then if things happen to the data, it seems like the laws that apply are maybe where the data is located, and that can be really, really a big deal in intellectual property because trade secrets, for instance, aren't well protected in many other countries, and your trade secrets may be out there on some cloud server because a business's unit is using it to connect with their various international subsidiaries and stuff.
That's a good point. And as a matter of fact, I think there was I think it was the University of California wouldn't move information to the cloud for the reason that the vendors that they were considering, Google being one of them, couldn't even answer the question, where is the data? Because it's scattered over so many servers and literally in different continents and so on. And they might have made a really convincing argument about security, but their policy specified something about the location, or needing to know the location of where is it going to be, and Google literally couldn't say. So,
well, and I was noticing, so I'm in this other class, this IP asset management,
who teaches that?
Susan Prohofsky Kurtz and Matthew Clara. In last week's assignment, we were supposed to look for an asset management software kind of package and get our checklist of everything we wanted, for if we were going to have a small firm or a small department. And so I had just been at a meeting and I was looking at all of these asset management software programs, cloud-based, and they all use web interfaces. And I was thinking, man, you could really get into a lot of trouble with your clients depending on what happens and how you're hosting stuff. And, because in the patent world, for instance, a lot of the interactions with clients aren't actually so, when you're pursuing a patent application, everything you say during that time is on record anywhere, is discoverable and can be used against you to get the patent and then validate it later. And so, there's really not even a level of protection for that. And often in discussions, for what do we put in the patent application, what are the claims going to say? One of the things you have to do is scan to make sure that in the examples section where the
Sorry, so who's got spot?
that they have to put in trade secrets. And so there's all this constant exchange of information. Disasters.
Yes, you're right. And I have a feeling that we're going to see the edge of that, and when some disaster does occur, and then everybody else who doesn't get screwed is going to redecide to leave and learn their lesson. Changes will be made. What's appropriate in the meantime?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it would be nice for them
No threats come, but if it does,
It's a great idea.
prepping students.
I guess what I would, since it's really got an intellectual property focus, at least maybe run it by Ken and see if he's interested, and if not, or if so, or I could meet with him and talk
Do you mind
to
if I
him about.
CC you on
Not at all.
Harrington?
Not at all. I think there's something about what I'm thinking about, what he might be, and what Chris Coons is doing. Maybe there's. I think it would be fun too. And I'd like to learn more about it.
Yeah, and I think it would be relevant for all students too, not just like.
So what? Out of curiosity, when you say an asset management software, what does it actually track and do?
Well, it's
Okay,
maybe
I
some
know I
like
had
hybrid
someone posted it on Facebook today and I couldn't bring it up. And I
intellectual property that I think sometimes do because there's international applications and national stage filings.
Seriously, so it sort of knows about all of
So,
that, and
Yeah,
it
and then it keeps, so there's like a document aspect, then there's, many of them incorporate country law files that they update,
okay.
which is really nice, so you know what the laws are in the other countries. You can follow anything from response time, that you can have to be within to, how to file an oath or declaration, that kind of stuff. And then there are databases, so there's like invention submissions when the inventor makes an invention. They're supposed to record it in an invention submission, and various companies have different ways of getting those invention submissions either to their responsible attorneys, to their responsible technical directors. Somebody's to review it to see if they're going to pass it on to a patent thing or if they want to keep it a trade secret. And then there's like, you need a database for your trade secrets, but actually I found it interesting because I personally would want to keep my trade secrets in any, I would want like something like an Excel file that I made or some program I developed on my own in my own company. I would not want it on one of these databases.
You just for the reasons that you've been kind of describing.
And but at the same time, I want throughput because we just ran into a problem where our council sent out a patent application outside to have outside council drafted because they were running out of time. It came back in, they didn't review it. They filed a patent application.
Oh crap.
Huge disclosure of trade secrets.
For God's sake.
So fortunately, they caught it before publication because there's a publication window, and so then you can go into the patent offices and
And basically shut it down, but it's very scary, you're right.
And so like one thing that I would like the ability to have a trade secret.
It's a lot of work though.
To like keyword review, just put a program and put your patent application in.
But I mean, so how do you compare the risk of putting something out in the cloud, say, with the risks that somebody in your firm just does something stupid with the information, like in the old world of right now, when 5 years ago it is, I draft something up and I email it to somebody, and they can do whatever the heck they want with it, and they could leave it on a street corner, or they could forward it to somebody who inappropriately or whatever.
I think that the risk is slightly higher at least because there's more potential users of access or
Right.
unauthorized users of access. So
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I missed a couple of people, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. So hopefully we can get through to the exercise. So number one rule on social networking sites is just don't post it. You don't have to fill in all the fields. You don't have to tell them your politics, your religion. Pseudonyms I think are great. Especially if you want a snarky personality, make up a fake name. Put a picture of your dog in there, or the person you hate most. Self-surveillance. You may want to be on a social networking site just to monitor what other people are saying about you. I know someone who has a Facebook post solely to untag pictures that have tagged him. Right? I mean, I think it's important. I think it's a mistake to say, I'm not going to do Facebook, I'm not going to do Google+, because you want to know if people are talking about you. Twitter, you want to notice when people are mentioning you. So I think it is a mistake. I think you're not managing your brand very well if you just opt out entirely. So that's something I think to be aware of. And again, I think it's totally appropriate to have a professional, a personal, and a snarky personality, but don't do it with one account. It's easy enough to set up multiple accounts. I think you should even segregate your social networks. And sometimes it's not even stuff you post. This is Obama's chief speechwriter, and after Hillary Clinton got knocked out of the nomination, they had a party, and it's quite obvious that he's groping the boob of a cardboard character, but this is not the sort of thing you want your boss to see first thing in the morning, right? In the Washington Post. He kept his job, but I can only imagine, what candidate Obama had to say to him. So even things you don't do, again, you want to be online to monitor what other people are posting. And I'm guessing by his hangover hadn't even worn off before he had to talk to his boss.
That's excellent.
There is a lot of overlap, and this is just to introduce my idea that it's probably a good idea to have your personal stuff on Facebook or on MySpace or Google+. Separate your personalities. Your professional stuff on LinkedIn, and then don't mix them. This woman friended her boss on Facebook, and he fired her on Facebook. That shit stuff I pay you to do is called your job, right? If you're going to have a site where you're going to kvetch to your friends, have a separate social network. Don't invite your boss, right? Facebook can, actually there are a whole bunch of these, but I just grabbed one. I think it also might be a little helpful to talk about different types of information of websites. Classic web pages were very static, right? They just were there, and that's what a lot of websites that are done by people still are. A lot of websites these days are dynamically rendered, and Amazon.com is the best example, where when you click on a link, they customize that page for you on the fly. There is no static page for that book or that lawn chair. I mean, all of the headers, all of that just comes zooming in. As a matter of fact, Amazon even changes the price depending upon how many people are buying it. The price is dynamic from day to day. Everything, it's just a bunch of databases, and then they slap on the formatting, the fonts, the headers, all of that at the end, at the moment you click that link. And AJAX, asynchronous JavaScript, and XML, this is kind of like Google Earth. The idea is that, if you're looking at a web page and you keep scrolling, I mean, generally pages have to reload, but with AJAX, it's loading as fast as you can scroll, right? I mean, it's a web page that, in theory, is already preloaded, and as fast as you scroll. So there are very interesting things going on. I mean, the web is really changing. And fire hoses, I think of Twitter and Facebook as a fire hose. I mean, it is just a constant stream of information, and you just grab a little snapshot of it. I mean, it is the exact opposite of a static web page. And the good news about fire hoses is that oftentimes if you do something embarrassing, it'll be lost in the fire hose, I mean, Twitter's only kept for 10 days or whatever. And that's why I use these as information, to obtain information. I use them to see what's going on, sort of put your finger on the pulse of, your friends. And Facebook, I mean, really, I just think of it as a high bandwidth Twitter. I mean, it's just all of this stuff just flying right past. So I think that, again, what you're trying to do with your website, with your web presence, will affect which tool you choose. And that's why I think you want a web page. You want something static that people can find, that you can maintain. And then if you want, you can link it to the fire hose. but you really have no idea what people are going to get on any given day if they click into your Facebook page or your Twitter account. And then document management systems, this is what attorneys tend to work with every day. All of you, I'm sure, will go to a firm where you'll be working with a document management system to try to find briefs, to retrieve those sorts of things. And so these are something that attorneys work with every day. Websites are increasingly content management systems. I mean, they're much more, any sophisticated website is much more like Amazon than it is like the old static image or static website, because they are taking your content and they are, you've got the styles one place, you've got the content over here. Sometimes you even have a workflow, the junior attorney blogs it, the senior partner is then going to review it before it gets posted. Websites are becoming increasingly sophisticated, and these are things you're likely to use. I was talking with an alum earlier this week, and he's the youngest guy in the firm. He's like 27, and his boss is writing him to blog more because they found that when they blog, they get more clients. And he's like, well, if you do some of my job, I'll blog more, but I'm working like 60 hours a week, dude, back off. Was his response. But the firm sees a direct benefit to blogging, and as the youngest person in the firm, you're likely to get stuck with this. You're going to be the one working with the content management system. So I hope that you guys, learn something in this class, because it's likely that if you do go to a firm, you're going to end up doing these sorts of things. Now, Simon talked about the sort of back channel that Twitter can be. It's actually, there are all sorts of different information streams going on. But also, I use broadcasting. I call this multicasting. I will post something on my blog, and then I will post the link to LinkedIn, and that will automatically go through to all of these other websites. And if I want, I can just post it to Twitter, and then it'll go to Google Plus and to Facebook. Now, I actually tend to go here and repost them because I actually, want the image to show up. I think the attractiveness of the image has a lot to do with whether or not people click on the link or even notice it. But one of the ways to be efficient, because you don't have a lot of time on your hands, is to figure out how to link these things up so that you can automatically post through all of them. Now with Facebook and Twitter, there's a Twitter app that Twitter maintains for Facebook. For Google Plus, you kind of have to do a workaround. There are a couple of different ways to do it. TweetDeck, some of the different services will support it. LinkedIn automatically, you can just hook it up with your Twitter account. Multicasting is one way, I think, to do this. Now, that's a form of broadcasting. Now, syndication, we talk about things going into syndication. Syndication is when you have a bunch of television channels who are working together. They syndicate the content, they buy it, replay it on their network. Really, that's what a lot of attorneys do with link trading, right? One of the things, the core thing that Google looked at when they started was how many people link to a website, right? Because that was sort of the gold standard of utility. And that's still important. And if you can get your friend and his law firm to, put links to your blog and you put links to his blog, it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and that's going to boost your Google score, right? Because people are linking into it. So one of the things that people often miss is just doing link trading, right? If you have several friends, and when I was, in solo practice, I had several other solo practitioners, and we all talked together about all of our cases. None of us had blogs back then. I don't think blogs even existed. But today, we would be doing link trading. That's just a way to increase all of your web presence, and it costs absolutely nothing, right? You just have to read your friend's stuff and comment on it once in a while, link to it. Now, I also think echo chambers, there are certain blogs, certain, political groups. If you post something that they're interested in, they will just repeat it. They will start, and sometimes it's crazy how things catch fire, and spread across the internet. But you have to sort of figure out who those echo chambers are. And the problem is sometimes they're mutually exclusive. You can't get the different groups to agree on sorts of things. But that's really what you're looking for. You're trying to write things that are of interest to people that they're going to mimic and put out there. Competitive intelligence. I saw a really interesting documentary where a competitive intelligence analyst calls up the vice president at the competing firm, and he says, I'm a headhunter, and I want to recruit you to be the VP of International Finance for a corporation that doesn't exist. And he brings the guy in for the interview, and he totally debriefs him on everything his unit was doing. And then he turned around and gave it to his competitor. Now, as attorneys, we can't do that, right? That'd be misrepresentation, whether it was us or our subordinates. But that's really where competitive intelligence is at. You know, everything short of breaking the law. You know, lying under oath is bad. Lying the rest of the time, not as bad. But you want to use social networking to investigate fellow professionals, research vendors before you hire someone. You know, if you're going to put your information on the cloud, what are the reviews? What are other people saying? You know, and oftentimes you want to look at just a sector. You want to restrict by geography. And LinkedIn is all over that. Their advanced search page, you can restrict by geography. You can restrict by industry. All of these different ways. I mean, that's another thing that makes LinkedIn really great, I think, is that they understand people are doing competitive intelligence research, and they give you the tools to do it for free, right? Everybody likes free. LinkedIn has a lot of different categories, and this is one of the things that will help if you're looking, the default is people. If you want to search companies, you know, you have to change your search. But they also have a lot of applications. You know, they've got SlideShare, which is something that I've been putting up some of the slides that I make for classes up there as a way to just, you know, share information of my expertise. They have a new one, Legal Updates by J.D. Supra. Polls, I read something very interesting. An IT manager was looking at, you know, getting some new software. So they actually paid experts to fill out a poll as to what they thought of the different vendors that they were looking at. So for $50, they got the expertise of these guys who would have charged them hundreds of dollars an hour to come in and, you know, do sort of a site survey. Lots of interesting things going on at LinkedIn. Box.net is kind of like Google Documents, just another way, but it's linked in directly to your account. Google Presentations. Projects and Team Spaces. This is kind of project management software. If you hang out your own shingle and you don't have project management software and you think it might be helpful, LinkedIn's got something for free. I mean, who else is giving you business-oriented documents for free? Lawyer ratings. This is something that's just been added, I think, in the last 6 months. At least it wasn't there last time I looked at the different things. Portfolios, you know, can you put together some things that you've done that sort of show what you do and what your style is? My wife likes TripIt, but she travels a lot, but that's something that may appeal to you. So these are all things that you can get directly from LinkedIn, you know, sort of associations that they've made. But I think it comes down, you know, what do you want to get out of, what do you want your personal brand to be? What do you want to represent to the world? You know, there are all of these different channels. There are pros and cons. But I think increasingly we are moving to mobile commuting. And I think one of the great things about being an attorney is you don't need a lot of infrastructure. You know, you don't have to have a factory. You know, you can be down in the Bahamas on vacation, checking your email on your smartphone a couple of times a day. A lot of other professions, you know, if you're working retail, you have to be in the shop. So I think that's one of the advantages that we have. But again, I think, you know, you have to start out with that strategic question. What am I interested in? Where do I want to be in 5 years? What do I want to become an expert in? You know, and then how do I broadcast that expertise to other people? Metacognition is a fancy phrase for thinking about thinking. But again, I think that goes back to going, you know, the information overload, spotting trends, taking in all of the information and looking for your niche. You know, where can you make a difference? Where can you become the expert, something that no one else has seen before? And attorneys are knowledge workers, right? That's what we're selling is our expertise, our ability to go through the law. And attorneys are professional researchers. I mean, whether you think of it that way in the past, you are being paid to go and research the law specific to that person's situation. But there are lots of other things that, you know, you have a case about architectural malpractice. Well, you're going to have to learn a lot about architecture, about engineering. You know, when I talk to attorneys in practice, they are researching all sorts of things that are not strictly legal. Because, you know, you can't just say, I only do legal stuff. You know, the rest of the world keeps intruding on your law practice. And I think it's also important to know yourself in the world. SWOT is, you know, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is kind of, you know, business planning 101. You know, what are my strengths? What do I bring to the table? What are my weaknesses and my firm's weaknesses? And then opportunities and threats. If that's sort of just a basic level of strategic analysis to sort of figure out what can you add, what are your vulnerabilities, how do you hide them. So, safety Neil, I have to, don't text while you drive or walk, right? You've got to set some limits. Just because we can be connected 24/7 doesn't necessarily mean we should be. I think you also need to be aware of mood swings, right? Don't email when you're angry. Don't post to Facebook when you're angry. Again, try to protect that personal brand. You think of something really snarky, leave it sit for 30 minutes. If you still think it's funny, then go ahead and send it. Sarcasm, of course, is very hard to read online, and so can self-deprecating humor. You may think it's a joke. Your friends may realize it's a joke. Department of Homeland Security may not think it's as funny. So I would be very careful with self-deprecating humor, which is odd because I think that's kind of like the geek call sign, right? I mean, we're very good at making fun of ourselves. That's what we do, but be very careful of it in online settings. If you're facing personal challenges, your mother's come down with cancer or something, I think do you want to broadcast that to everyone or just to your friends? In Facebook, it's kind of hard sometimes to know who all is saying that. So I think, I just try to, again, think about who's going to read this. Do I really want to put my personal challenges out there to the entire world? And of course, geocoding and stalking, anymore, like Facebook, Google Maps, they all want to know where you're located. We live in a day and age where, GPS is in your phone, and they can know where you are, but it makes me a little nervous. And frenemies, this is a portmanteau that comes from Sex and the City. Fake friends, real enemies, right? I sometimes have people I have people on Facebook who, we work together, we get along okay, we really don't like each other. So be aware when you're, if you have frenemies in your social networking service, they may use anything revealing against you, right? It's just the way it is. And so, we're talking a lot about social media, and social media is great. It's free. It's easy. If you don't have enough clients, you can spend your time here, but time is expensive. If you're charging $150, $200 an hour on Facebook or an hour on LinkedIn, there's a real opportunity cost to that. It may be that you want, if you can afford television ads, those might be the way to go. But it depends to some degree on who your clientele is. If you're doing estate planning, right, there aren't a lot of, 80-year-olds on LinkedIn probably. As a matter of fact, I've seen a few internet research reports. I know they're not on there. So to some degree, it depends upon what type of practice you have. Who is my audience? How am I going to get at them? This may be great, but it may be that radio is still the best option. Radio gets to a lot of the community. What is the cost-benefit analysis? What's cheapest, in terms of time or money? So Minnesota Lawyer, right? You guys read Minnesota Lawyer? Should start, if you don't. Their website is minlawyer.com. MinnesotaLawyer.com has been purchased by a Mitchell grad, Aaron Hall, who he's on Twitter, he's on Facebook, he's on Google+. Aaron is just about everywhere, it seems. But I think this is really clever of him, and he's not been out that long. I taught internet legal research with him. But he bought that domain. So people going to Minnesota Lawyer, maybe to go to the newspaper, actually end up on his website. And he just bought the domain, just like Simon bought SimonCan.com. And really, that's like $10 a year. So, sometimes you just have to look for that opportunity. Super lawyers, this is something that Law and Politics started. In some states, this isn't legal. This is considered lawyer advertising that might be a misrepresentation. As I understand it, there might be some criteria, but they largely, they pay a lot for these, right? But maybe it's worth it. And I noticed, these Minnesota super lawyers have blogs. Even though they're charging, $300, $350 an hour or something, they think it's worthwhile to blog, to put themselves out there to sort of showcase their expertise, or maybe to talk to clients. Depending upon your practice area, you may not want a law blog, right? Law blogs are only interesting to lawyers. If you're trying to reach clients, maybe you want to blog about the area. If you want to be a fashion lawyer, maybe you should blog about fashion because fashion designers will read it, rather than blogging about fashion law because then only the other fashion lawyers will read it. You know, who is your audience? What are you trying to put yourself out as? Someone who's an expert in the area, someone who's interested in the area? Where are your clients' eyeballs? So these are things that I think when you make a media plan, not just a social media plan, but a media plan, where are your audience? How are you going to communicate? What image do you want to put out there? Any questions about that? Seriously, I talked for 90 minutes. You guys got nothing? Okay, well, let's break up into groups of 4, and we're going to have a quick exercise to hopefully reinforce some of this. So, go.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Are you going to be using this for the?
I could use this one instead.
Oh, no, that's okay. Don't worry about it. When you're done, I'll put the signs.
Oh, this is you.
You see it? It could be on the desktop.
Yeah, I actually just want to go back to Google Docs. Okay, so you have been hired by Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, and they practice commercial real estate law, and they also practice landlord-tenant law. And your goal is to come up with a media plan for them. All right, so we'll give you about 10 minutes. Do some web research. Can you find law firms that are practicing in these areas? You know, can you find LinkedIn group? You know, where are commercial lawyers and landlord-tenant laws? And who's your audience? Is it the same audience for these 2 practice areas, or do you need 2 different media plans? All right, so you've got 10 minutes to think about that, do some research, and then we'll report back.
Right.
I see it maybe as splitting. You know, you in the real estate context, since the landlord's tenant, so you can make it seem that both the landlord and tenant are because you've got less about
existentialism, whatever it is, something, you know, I did probably say that's what
Well, I'm saying this is
hearing that and one slowly it kind of build bits and pieces, and then before you know it, it's like it's spot on. So I think that's a very it's a really cool way of teaching something.
where you like professional.
Very clever.
What are the implications
Those connections. And you also are not shy about saying what is which is nice. Like Eric's special.
Yeah, it was Derek. And it was like kind of a dozen lawyers, not professional lawyers, really not professional from the grants and how they had some special. This is my software, and so I was a right? And there were some people from over to San Diego that were trying to get a link. And, you know, at times like buses and backpack and I can do new offices.
This real estate is at this location.
So let's just do this one.
Yeah.
Okay, questions might be more, plan to spend more time answering this, whereas you kind of pull out. Yeah. Towns might have the same kind of problem. But for each person. Okay.
Yeah. So what's a better way to approach it as far as
What kind of
Because we can make the uniform transparency to commercial real estate. I don't, we don't really think of the lots. Everything, it's so part of it. Client. So are we wanting?
Yeah, I'll take an individual. Individually,
All right, I lied. Time's up. Let's start with the back corner. What did you guys think? Who was our audience, first of all?
Well, we kind of talked about sophistication levels. We think commercial real estate, you probably can have a lot more sophisticated potential clients, whereas landlord-tenant, you might have people saying, like, I just got evicted, what do I do, or how do I evict this person?
Mm-hmm.
So based on that, there's different, avenues you can take. Then if the landlord-tenant, more with blog style, more answering simple questions to get people attracted to your site, really like Minnesota-specific law that will help there. Commercial real estate would probably be a little more broad because like word of mouth, especially, that's going to help there.
And so word of mouth, you would, a
Commercial
whisper
real estate, just
campaign,
knowing
or did
what's
you have how would you translate word of mouth into a media plan?
Like the LinkedIn style, just networking.
Mm-hmm. Recommendations.
Yeah, in the business community.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. How about this group?
First part of our discussion focused on how the issues that are going to be important to the landlord or the tenant relationship and also important to commercial real estate are going to be similar sorts of narratives, but just what's prioritized needs to be different depending upon which audience it is. So with the tenant situation, one of the things that we want to put out and stress immediately are sort of what their abilities are, rights are underneath the law that's available to them. And getting that out in sort of a static, frequently asked questions sort of way. So we feel like on that side of the spectrum, a lot of what's happening or what you're going to be dealing with is relatively locked in. Your questions are going to be simple ones about where do I go to get this information that I need to figure out what I do in the situation where my landlord has failed my lease or where I'm being told that I have failed it and I have to be kicked out. That they're going to later on down the line be giving them more specific information, but they need quick direct access to just generally here's the resource I go to.
And showing that you understand the basic issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same sort of stuff you do in your first client interview.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, just sort of getting it out there so that they can, information seeking behavior again, right? They want to know this and they're in panic mode. A good website can be very reassuring.
Yeah, and I mean, from my own experience, it's also going to calm you down as an individual because you don't have to answer the same question 100 times to someone who goes, but in my situation it's different because I have 2 kids. Or in my situation because I have a dog, which is actually a CNI dog that I'm training. They're like, right, I know, we'll get to that, but first let's pay through. Whereas on the flip side of it, with a commercial real estate oriented entity, someone who's looking to acquire property, protect rights or anything, those are the ones just because of who they are, more typically people with money and influence and not a lot of time they can spread around. They're going to be the ones that are going to want something a lot more instantaneous, a Twitter feed type response or a message response or some way that they can get real-time answers. And that in order to give them that access, you have to have all that other background information ready to go, but you're going to be taking a slightly different slant with them. So you might be directing them more towards your fire hose, whereas the tenants are directed work which are static. And then working in opposite directions possibly with them.
That's interesting. How about you guys?
We, similarly to the other groups, kind of split the landlord and tenant with the commercial in terms of sophistication. And we really thought that it would be particularly important in the commercial aspect to be have a good presence on LinkedIn, because a lot of your clients are going to be more like business owners and stuff like that. And I think as you meet business people throughout your community, if you connect with them on LinkedIn and they see that you do commercial real estate law, when they have an issue that comes up, they're more likely to pursue you. And I think a lot of business relations tend to happen on LinkedIn. A lot of business owners tend to pursue, from my experience, tend to pursue their network first when they're looking for a specific practice area that we wind up meeting. And another thing, we found a couple of popular blogs for commercial real estate, Square blog and LoopNet. So it seems like there's already some sophisticated blogs out there. So it might not be practical to create your own blog, but to make sure that you're following those blogs and showing that you're up to date.
Or comment on those blogs. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to write a whole blog post, right? You just put something, illustrative in a comment on a blog post.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, then you join the community, you start to get known. Good. How about the back group?
Right. So, approach we took was we let it up by practice area. So we split it up. We figured out we get main firm LinkedIn profile, and then each attorney that specializes in commercial real estate law or landlord-tenant law would have their own kind of pseudonym LinkedIn profile that they could ultimately link back to the main profile. And our potential clients we saw as property management companies for the commercial real estate law, and also tenants and also property management companies and tenants for the landlord-tenant law.
Okay, good. I actually talked to a real estate attorney, and one of the things he said that surprised me was that for commercial real estate, he put up a blog. He didn't blog about the law at all, right? He would blog about new apartments going up, financing deals, because the clientele, they don't want to read the law, right? That bored them. What excited them was money and architecture and buildings. And so that was, sort of his entree onto them. The other thing that he pointed out to me was that in commercial real estate, you often get tenants being evicted. And these tenants have put, maybe $250,000 into rehabbing a restaurant or something. They have a lot of fixtures that have attached. So you actually may end up doing, evictions of commercial tenants. Other times you represent the restaurant, and restaurants have peaks and lows. They make a lot of money in the fourth quarter, especially if you've got a yogurt shop, right? It's going to be kind of dead in the winter. You may have trouble making money in your fourth quarter. And so they're often negotiating with landlords to try to get more time. He was saying that to some degree he became expert on, how desperate is the commercial real estate? Are they just going to, Mall of America is just going to throw you out, right? Because they've got other people lined up. But if it's a struggling mall, Southdale or something, right, they're much more willing to work with you because they don't have the same demand that they used to have. So I thought it was interesting the sort of overlap you could see in these. But landlord-tenant isn't necessarily, just individuals or, small apartments. But I could very easily see two different blogs, one aimed at tenants, another one aimed at developers, maybe even a separate blog aimed at landlords. You're not necessarily going to have the same audience going to the same blog. You think you set up one blog, right? And that's where everybody will come. But you may want to segment your audience. You may want to say different things to landlords and different things to tenants.
Another good indicator of what we were talking about, if you just Google commercial real estate law, what pops up is a lot of this business venture capital tailored than the rest of it. A lot of government, here's Minnesota government websites regarding what so it kind of indicates that there is probably a different, like you said, different
market segment. Yeah. Okay, so how about one more? Oh, are we
2 minutes left.
2 minutes? Oh, okay. Well, then never mind. But you guys get the idea. I mean, I think audience analysis is something you always want to do, right? Who is my audience? Where am I going to find them? And then it's cost benefit. You know, do I have money? Do I have time? It's been my experience generally that when I have a lot of time, I don't have a lot of money. And when I'm making money, I don't have any time. You know, so I think that really affects, do you want print advertising? Do you want the phone book? You know, but maybe you can put up a YouTube video, you know, and get some of the attraction of TV, but put that on your blog. You know, it doesn't just have to be the written word.
Thank you very much. So refer to the syllabus, please. The assignment for due this Wednesday is to create a social media plan like we started to do in these groups just now, but only for the topic that you have already picked for your website. Think about the audience that you identified when you were considering layout and color issues and substance, and think about how you might approach them and what's your purpose. And then put it down, write it down for me in a short essay, same length as last time. And if you have questions along the way, let me know. Or, I mean, you know where to find us. We're all in the library, and don't hesitate to ask. Okay? Awesome. Have a great, great weekend. Syllabus is on the website, simoncan.wordpress.com. Okay? Thank you, Neil.